Alright, so let's start by basics. Let's take off the wheel. I was really shocked to find out that these things were basically being held on by nothing at all. If you notice, it doesn't take me anything to turn them off. What I'm talking about now is go ahead and invest in your crafts, guys. Invest in your crafts. Boom. 2 seconds. Take that thing off of there. About $100, still a $100 job. Don't expect any miracles out of it. Now, tires make good seat. Normally, I would put that under there just in case the jack failed, but in this case, I'm old, I need something to sit on. Alright, what I have here is a drilled and slotted rotor. Drilled holes and the slots cut into it. About to go over the difference between this rotor, and I forgot the other one, and this plain rotor right here. Why one's different, why they're better, why they're not. Alright, here let's have a quick look. Alright, right here we have the basics of a disc brake. On the far right we have the brake line that's going to bring in the brake fluid, and right there, if you notice, those are your brake pads. This little piece right here is your brake piston. Now they squeeze together on the pads to slow your car down. And what are they squeezing on? They're squeezing on that brake rotor. Now basically using friction to slow your car down and bring it to a stop. Now friction, as you know, causes a lot of heat. Heat is not good when it comes to your braking system. Those rotors have to find a way to cool themselves off. So let me show you exactly how they do that. Notice how they look like 2 discs put together. Those are called vents. Now these vents will allow heat to dissipate and also allow air to be sucked in to cool your rotors while you're driving. Wouldn't you know it? I just noticed a frayed wire. This is why my ABS has failed. Anyways, where was I? Oh, drilled and slotted rotors. Alright, let's see. Alright, so this is a drilled and slotted rotor. Okay, these slots. Imagine it's raining outside. They get wet. Your rotors get red. Your rotors get wet. These slots help to wick water off. They also help to bite into the pad better. These holes, they are for ventilation. Like I said previously, your rotor gets hot. On the flat-faced rotor, all you had is those vents. Now you have vents and holes to allow air to come out. Back in the day, the pads used to create a gas that would prevent the pad from touching the rotor. So these slots, these holes, would allow the gas to dissipate through them, thus being able to cause deep brake pads to the rotor. Now it's just a liability because you ever heated something up and then cooled it down rapidly, it usually tends to crack. But luckily for me, I will not be reaching those kind of temperatures with this, and I doubt any of you will, so definitely a good investment. I got mine for about $13 used. So pretty happy about that. After you've jacked up the car. Now after you've got your car lifted up, you want to make this job as easy as possible. So turn the wheel. You're going to turn your wheel, giving you access to the back. Nothing's worse than trying to get something off and you can't reach it because the wheel well's in the way. We'll start by popping off these dust caps. And that'll give us access to the bolts that we need. Okay, so I'm going to start off by breaking off the caliper using a breaker bar or a cheater bar. You can tell which direction you need to turn by imagining yourself facing that bolt. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. I always start with the breaker bar to get the most leverage. because these bolts are going to be on there, and using regular small ratchets is not going to work generally. Now, once they're broken loose, you can go ahead and switch to the normal ratchet. And trying to save some time, I'm going to go ahead and use the impact to pull these things out of here. There they go. The next thing I want to go ahead and do is remove the rattle clip. Now, these rattle clips or retention clips are not always found on calipers, but on this one happens to be one. You can do it with your hands or a screwdriver. I mean, your hands, if you're strong enough to do so. These are kind of old, and there it is. You want to replace that every time you do a brake job, but unfortunately, mine didn't come with it. Now, the struggle is going to kind of begin. Most of the time, I cannot stress enough, do not force it if it doesn't want to come off, but in this case I knew that I had undone all the bolts, and it was just a matter of a screw at the bottom that didn't want to come off. So, I'll show you later. Alright, got it off finally. Boom, bam. Alright, these are your brake pads right here. This thing. That is bad. That is really bad. It should not look like that. Excuse me for a moment. That's what your pad should look like. Look at the meat on that thing. Huh? Alright, let's get this show on the road here. Okay, so that's your caliper. And that is a brake pad inside of there. Look on the back, it's got these weird clips. Some of them won't have those. Those are retaining clips, and they're just basically there to help with vibration. It's supposed to make it a better ride. I don't know. I've had some with them, I've had some without them. Okay, back to it. Alright, these are your guide pins, slide pins, either one you want to call them. And you're going to go ahead and take them out of there because you want to apply some lube to them. Should I both come out of that? There they go. Don't let your caliper hang. Place it up there. Get a bungee cord, anything. This is your brake line. It can hold up your caliper, but it puts stress on it. Eventually it's going to break and it's going to be expensive. It'll be a tragedy. Place it up there. Put something around it to hold it up. Do not let it hang by the brake line. Okay, so back here we got our two bolts that hold our caliper bracket on. I'm going to go ahead and hit them with some deep creep. You did know the caliper bracket is what holds the caliper. Imagine that. It's got to come off before we can pull a rotor off. I'm also going to go ahead and spray the rotor with the deep creep. Deep creep, as I explained before, is penetrating fluid. You're definitely going to need some if you actually ever want to get anything off. Alright, time to go ahead and break these two bolts off. Now, unfortunately, the bolt is a 1/2-inch drive and my breaker bar is a 3/8, so good mechanics improvise. Take a bit of pipe and your 1/2-inch drive and you stick it on there, and then you go ahead and attempt to break it off. Now, this thing was giving me some trouble, and most times they will. These caliper brackets are on there. Yeah, it was at this point that I lost my bearings a little bit. I started pulling it the wrong way. Luckily, I was sitting there for maybe a second or two and I realized, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. We just went over that about 5 minutes ago. So I went ahead and straightened it up. Another pro tip here, one day this thing is going to come loose. So plan for that to happen. Because I didn't. I almost smacked my head on the car. So yeah, definitely one thing gotta consider, where you're gonna land, especially when you're breaking these things loose. This one, once again, this time I was a little cautious. Oh, there we go. Didn't kill myself as much. And once they're broken loose, you can go ahead and switch back to the hand tool. It's not as fun with the hand tools. I'd rather use the impact to pull stuff off of there. Make things a lot easier. And I'm going to talk a little more about the impact a little bit later. When to use it, when not to use it. Alright, just undoing the last bolts here. Holding the caliper bracket on there. Once this comes off, then we got to start a whole nother mission, and that is getting the rotors off. There is a difference between mine and the American type of car. Alright, helpful pro tip. Put the bolts, if you can, ever, on anything you're working on, put them back where they need to go. You're going to screw them back into the caliper. Why? Because it's confusing sometimes. You got like a whole plate full of bolts. Now you can't remember which one it goes. You know, in the heat of the moment, you kick the bolt and it rolls down the sewer. You never know. Put them back in there. It holds on to them. That way you know always where your bolts go. Alright, now it's time to take off the caliper, the rotor. Now, on these rotors, there's a bit of a difference. Normally, on the American type cars, you'll have 4 studs sticking out, which are like 4 screws, and this rotor would just come right off of that. This is a European car, and it doesn't work like that. There are no studs. There is a little bolt that goes into the center of the rotor that holds everything in place. And it is a pain to get out. It requires a 5mm Allen key, which I kind of have, and I'm going to go ahead and just do my best. It is probably going to strip, and I'm going to have to improvise. Alright, back with the Allen key bag. Go ahead and find the right one here. Confirm which way you're going to turn. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. I'm facing it, so I'm going to be pulling up. It's going to be turning to the left. And it's not doing a thing. Gonna put a little pipe action on it. Absolutely nothing. And what do you know? It's actually starting to strip. So, I am going to show you a trick that you should probably definitely not use unless it's an emergency. Nicely, I'm going to take a Torx bit that has no business being there, and I'm going to make its business to be there. This is rust bane right there. A little thing right for you. Lady. Everything will fit with enough pressure. That's exactly what I'm intending to do right here. If you ever find yourself in an emergency, you can hammer in something that shouldn't be hammered in there. I have another one. I do have another little bolt that goes in there, so I could always replace it. I'm not really too worried about damaging it. If I tried it again, it didn't work. We're going to go ahead and go back to hammering right here. Like I say, it is obviously not ideal. It's not something that you want to be doing. But, in a moment, it comes off without a hitch. It took me a second to get this one hammered in the other side, and easy peasy. Make sure she's good in there. Now, once again, I lost my bearings. and I turned it the wrong way. I was sitting there looking confused, and then I realized my mistake. And so we go ahead and hammer her back in there. And give her another turn. Slowly, but with force. And what do you know? Of course she wants to come out now. Alright, hit it with the impact for a second or two, and boom bam, she's out. Ta-da! There she is. Alright, now remember when I sprayed that rotor in the beginning? Probably don't, but I sprayed the rotor in the beginning. This is why it rusts usually to the hub. So, I'm going to take this screwdriver, I'm going to scrape along it here just to see if I can't break off a little bit of rust before I try to get it loose. Don't use rust paint to hit it, unless you don't ever want to use the rotor again. You want to go ahead and use Mr. Orange, dead blow hammer. Give it a couple of good whacks around the hub, and boom, there she goes. It's a bird. And now, you have successfully gotten everything off. It's just like taking apart a puzzle, and you're going to go ahead and reassemble that puzzle. Yeah, that was kind of a weird skip. Some rando came up to me and asked if I could work on her car. But anyways, so I got the rotor back on there, and now we're going to go ahead and finish her off. Okay, right now what's happening is I'm struggling to get this pin back in there. There are multiple holes the pin goes into, and I am just at a loss to sort this out. I'm going back and forth, checking the holes. Am I losing my mind? Did I put it in the right thing? I'm turning the rotor around a couple times to figure it out. I don't know if there's a trick to this, I don't know, but I couldn't figure it out. I mean, eventually I got it, obviously. Alright, it's 2 a.m., so I'm kind of rushing through this a little bit towards the end, but like I said, it's a puzzle, and you just take it apart and you put it back together the same exact way. That's exactly what I'm doing here. Just putting the pin back in there, and I'm going ahead and I'm looking at the caliper bracket to go ahead, and I'm going to reinstall that. Now, sometimes these things don't want to go in. Do not force them. I repeat, do not force them to go back in. Make sure everything is aligned correctly and torqued down to the proper spec. Everything has a proper spec. You don't want it to come off while you're driving. Torque it down to the proper spec. Alright, now that everything's reassembled, what we're going to do now is we are going to reinstall the brakes. I have new brake pads. If you had new brake pads, if you want to use the old, now is the time. That tool that I just showed you, show you it again momentarily, it's called a piston spreader. That right there is your piston. It's under a lot of pressure. I used to be able to push it with my fingers, but I'm old and not today. Before you start spreading any pistons, you are going to need to definitely open up the brake reservoir. Take your old pad, take your piston spreader, which is like a reverse vise, a reverse clamp right here, and then you're going to turn it. And that turning pushes the piston spreader out against the pad and pushes the piston back where it needs to go. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's not. Probably shouldn't feel any resistance. I mean, the tool is not very comfortable, so if it ever gets hard, it's really going to cut up your fingers, but I mean, it's better than doing it with just your fingers, so thank God for that. Now that I've gotten it all in there, you can go ahead and take it out now that your piston is completely flush. Make sure the piston is completely flush because the pads are going to give you a time if it is not. Double check. Everything looked good. Don't use a new pad for this. Use the old pad. You crack the pad. I don't care about the old pad. You shouldn't care about the old pad. Care about the new pad. Now that the piston is flush, inside the caliper bracket, we can go ahead and reinstall the brakes. Before we do that though, we're going to go ahead and put on some lube. I usually put the lube right here, where the brake pads are going to be sliding. So we place a little bit there. Not a whole heck of a lot. This stuff attracts metal and grime and whatever, so you do not want it heaping helping on there. Just a smidge. Alright, so now once I go ahead and grab my brake pads over here, I'm going to go ahead and slide them in place. Alright, so sometimes it doesn't matter which order you put them in, but in this case it does matter. There is a retaining clip on the back of that pad right there, and it is a pain to put in there. You will never be able to do it just like that. If you stick it on there and then try to put the caliper on there, you're a miracle worker. You can get it on. I couldn't do it. I'm not even going to try. Also, make sure that they're orientated correctly. Like that. It's a bit of a hard to push in there, considering that the springs are all new. This one actually didn't give me that hard of a time. The other side, oh man, I was like busting my knuckle trying to push it in there. There it goes, boom. Even I was surprised by that. And you take the other pad and place it on the other side. Make sure everything fits, everything lines up. These are your caliper guide pins. Slide pins, whatever you want to call them. Now is the time you can go ahead and lube them up. And in hindsight, you actually can put the caliper on there without replacing the slide pins to start off with. Once again, not too much lube, just a smidge. It attracts dirt and grime. Should also wipe them off before you do that, just to get off any other dirt and grime that might have previously been on there. I'm going to reinsert that one and do the same for the other one. Alright. Another pro tip here, there is a threaded end. Make sure that that threaded end is flush with the hole. It does not need to protrude. If it protrudes, then you are going to drive yourself insane wondering why this little clamshell is not closing. It's usually that. Now, I forgot something along the way. Okay, now we're just going to reassemble everything the same way we took it apart. These have a tendency to kind of get off kilter, so just make sure you're doing the proper thing. If they don't want to go in, don't force them. If they're crooked, back them out. Don't use the power tools. You see me use a power tool, but I don't recommend it. It happened to me one time, ended up screwing up somebody's caliper. Don't do it. Don't do it. Brake job, finish. Go ahead and put the dust covers back on. Go back on the bottom here. Voila. Brakes and rotors changed.